meeting. I'll remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded, and we would request to direct your questions to the chat. Congress Park Neighbors is an RNO that has been recognized by the city and defined as a neighborhood to the city. We've been a volunteer organization for over 40 years, participating in short and long-term projects. Our goal is to provide accurate information to neighbors about neighborhood issues that city government is deciding on and managing. Congress Park Neighbors, Inc. does not take positions on any issue or at any city meeting without first polling affected neighbors to ensure true representation. We welcome homeowners and renters alike. We are not an HOA. Hannah Ruiz from District 2 contacted me today, and I think she may be here at some point. I know there's been several issues around traffic on Jackson Street. So if she comes in, I'll have her say a few words. But now I'd like to introduce Georgia Garnsey. She's here from City Park Friends and Neighbors, RNO. They are advocates for City Park, and she's going to talk about a book on City Park that has recently been republished. Georgia?
Hello. I tried to become visible to you guys, but for some reason, the world does not want me to be visible. So I am here as a president of City Park Friends and Neighbors with my friend and board member, Patty Paul. And Patty has initiated a wonderful project for City Park, okay, Friends and Neighbors, and for the community. It has to do with the only book, history, ever written about City Park, which we've relied on for our tours, and it went out of print. And Patty has spent 2 years bringing this book back into the public venue, and it's been a pretty thrilling experience. So I'll let her tell you a little about it. We know your schedule is full, but thank you for having us.
Well, I would love to show you the book. I'm holding it up in front of the camera, which doesn't seem to be cooperating. This book was originally published in 1986 by Betty Peters. She self-published it. It was her thesis as a student at UC Denver in history, and Thomas Noel was her supervisor on the project, and he has wonderful things to say about it. Because we all border City Park, I'm reaching out to people who may be interested in getting the book. There's over 60 beautiful historic photos in the book from different sources like Historic Denver, Tom Noel, the Western History Department. And this was done with the blessing of Betty before she passed away, and her family since she passed away. It's just something that anybody that loves and appreciates City Park should have. You can get it through City Park Friends and Neighbors at our website. We are also an RNO. And you can also get it in the gift shop of the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. You can get it at the Park Hill Community Bookstore. So I wish I could show it to you. It's really beautiful, but if the camera starts working, I'll just hold it up eventually. And if you have any questions, you can go to our website. We're asking for a $20 or more donation for the book.
Thank you, ladies. It is a wonderful book, especially if you're a user of City Park, which I'm sure many of us are. Hannah Ruiz is here. Hannah, did you want to say a couple words?
Yes, thank you, Vicki. I was just gonna kind of go over a few things that we're doing. Of course, we've been busy with Christmas, with the holidays, so we've been super busy with all our events.
Oh.
I do have our crime stats up right now, and I can go over those real quick before I go on. It appears that we're up on violent crimes are up 100%. Meaning from, and this is just the last 28 days. So I'd have to research what they are and what is involved, but that's the number I got. And this is all on our crime dashboard. So any of you can pull it up and look at it. You just pull up your neighborhood and you can put in from the past 3 years, 28 days or 180 days. So it's all available to everybody. And this is part of Chief Thomas's transparency. So anyone can look this up. There also is an increase in property crimes, and that is up 20%. That includes like theft from motor vehicles, larceny, burglary, and auto theft. Other crimes, that would be white collar crimes, public orders, drug, alcohol, all of those is up 4%. So overall, we have a 20% increase in our crimes there. And again, like I said, you can actually go to that dashboard and you can all look it up and you can kind of go over some of the stuff and you can change it and go from the past 3 years, 180 days and so forth. And onto what else we're going to revamp our neighborhood watch program. That's something that a lot of people have been interested in. I actually spoke to a gentleman from Congress Park today, and he was talking about getting that going in his neighborhood. So we'd like to, offer that. We can try and figure out in whatever neighborhood, it's a block radius. We can go over some of the details on how we can get that started. And it's just being neighbors, being neighborly, kind of looking out for each other, basically. So that's something we're going to try and revamp. We also, I believe, some of you do probably attend our 2CAB meeting. So our next 2CAB meeting is on January 10th. And it's from 6. Well, we have a preview at 5, which if you're here at the station, will be available to answer questions and talk to everyone. But the actual meeting starts at 6, and that should be available in person or virtual. So I know that was a lot. I just rambled off. So does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Hannah. Oh, Amber.
Yeah, thank you. What was that meeting you were talking about again? I didn't quite catch that. I've never heard of that.
We call it the 2CAB meeting. So it's actually our district meeting here at our district station, and we hold it once a month. And what it is we our commander and our lieutenants are all present. So they kind of go over some of the crime stats that I just went over with you, but they'll go over them, and sometimes they're a little more detailed. So they have maybe more information about something that happened, and they can talk about it with the community. And we also have other guests that we had. I don't think we had the DA yet, but we were going to invite the DA over, kind of, give you an overall so that you can ask them questions about, something that has to do with the DA. We had 911 at one of our meetings. So they went over, when you call 911, sometimes, there was a lot of people who are upset over the wait time or not getting a response. So they kind of went over all of that stuff. So it happens once a month. We change our guests. And so it's kind of nice, added. And we also give prizes away too. So kind of incentive to get people to come to the meetings.
Thanks for the info. Yeah.
Victoria, you share that with your RNO members, right?
Yes,
So-
we do.
Okay.
Yes, we do. And Amber, I've gone to several of the meetings and it's always quite interesting, their presentations. Is anyone here from Spinelli's? And I know the guy from Chaim from House of Copa is trying to get in, but having trouble with the passcode. So I'm going to ask again, is there there was a representative from Spinelli's that was going to be here tonight? Okay.
Vicky,
Yeah,
we had a hard time getting on. Sorry to bull in here, but we had to put in a passcode,
right.
and the passcode, may I recite it so the person having trouble can use it? Or they just have to go back and look
Right.
the original thing. And the
I'm going to
should-
mute myself for a
That
minute.
should be automatic. If you follow the link that was sent to you, you should not have to ask, you shouldn't have to put that in.
It wasn't automatic. We couldn't figure it out, but but hope.
It was not
hopefully-
automatic. I agree with you.
Okay, well, sorry to hear that. It was automatic for a lot of other people, so. But we'll work on that.
We're not automatic. That's the problem.
Georgia, are you coming in from your phone?
No, we had trouble getting in by just clicking as I usually do. So we put in the password that they indicated and then we were able to get in. That may be the problem with our video. I don't know.
Shouldn't be, but I'm sorry to hear that. Well,
Well, I'm not a genius at this, so it could be a mistake at my end. Bye.
Sorry for that delay. I just texted him the passcode. So we'll see. I know Emma Harrison is here with BRT. I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Emma. Are you guys ready? Is that okay?
I think we have our team here. Nick and John, are you two ready to roll?
Hey, Emma, I'm here. I think I see Nick. Nick, you want to give us a thumbs up or a hi? How you doing?
All good. I just am not able to share my screen. So if that's able to be turned on for me, we can share our presentation.
Nick, you should be good to go.
Okay, great.
All right. So hello, everybody. This is your friendly neighborhood East Colfax Avenue Bus Rapid Transit project team here. My name's Jonathan Stewart. I'm the project director. We have Emma Harrison and Nick Vanderquack. And yeah, we're here to talk a little bit about Colfax BRT, a little bit of a follow-up from our, we were here at a meeting a few months back. I think it was in October, I believe. And so we got some questions and just wanted to come back and have a little follow-up. So I want to say thank you for having us. We're happy to be here. So I'm going to just be pretty quick. I'm basically giving the intro here. I'll give a brief overview just of the project. Just as a reminder, I'll try and be as quick as I possibly can so that we can spend more time diving into the questions that we received from all of you. So with that, let's just go, Nick, let's just go straight to the next slide and really get into it. So basically, this project runs from Denver Union Station east to I-225. The yellow section is the downtown segment. We have side running BRT in this area. There's already lanes dedicated in this segment of the project. So very little new construction will be happening in that segment. And then the blue segment, which I would imagine is the most interest to the Congress Park neighbors because it runs through your neighborhood. The blue segment has center running BRT, has two bus only dedicated lanes in the center of Colfax with stations in the center, and the station locations are shown on the diagram below in blue. And then on the farther east segment of the project, the orange section, is within the city of Aurora. We have side running BRT there in mixed flow traffic. So basically, I think the main segment that we're here to talk about is the blue segment between Broadway, essentially Civic Center Station and Yosemite, that has center running bus only lanes with a median between Broadway and Yosemite. It'll have frequent and more consistent bus arrival times, consistently 4.3 minute. There'll be a new bus every 4.3 minutes. It'll have these bus stations that are in the center of the roadway. We'll have level boarding. That means they'll be raised up to the same level of the bus platform, so it'll be easier and quicker to get on and off. And also, you'll pay for getting on the bus at the station instead of on the bus. And all of that is a way to get quicker travel times for the bus, for this transit project. And essentially, Dottie and the city as a whole has been asking, what do communities, what do the people of the city want most for their transportation network? What we've heard over and over and over again is that they want a transportation network that is safer. They want a transportation network that provides other alternatives besides single occupancy vehicles for getting around the city. And we've heard that we want something that has more environmental resilience, something that responds to climate change. And we feel that East Colfax BRT does those three things very well. And that is why we're doing this project. And so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so that was the project overview. What you see before you on the slide here is the questions that we received regarding traffic impacts on from the Colfax BRT or traffic impacts along 13th and 14th, just wanting more detail on traffic impacts in general. And so Nick here, he works with Fair and Piers. They are the traffic experts. They're basically a scientist in traffic flow. Nick is amazing at his job, and we've spent some time asking him to really dive in and come up with really thoughtful answers to these questions. So with that said, Nick, I'd like to hand it over to you, and hopefully you can get into these questions and take us from there.
Thanks, John. Yeah, thanks for having us on. We're always happy to talk about this project and want to make sure we're being transparent with the analysis and answering your questions. So these are the questions that CPN has given the project team. And I'll be walking through each of these one by one, so I won't go over them on this slide here. But as John mentioned, really focused on the transportation impacts of the Colfax BRT project. So the first question that was asked was looking at, there's concerns about space for trash and recycling and new compost bins on 13th and 14th and the neighborhood side streets, with possible loss of parking and new vehicle traffic being diverted to those streets. How will this be addressed? So first off, I understand this is trash and recycling are a concern within Congress Park. That them as themselves, they're not directly related to the East Colfax BRT. But understanding why this came up with the Colfax BRT, there's a couple of points to be made, kind of really showing how it should not have a big impact on those operations as they're currently operating right now. So the first point here is that demand for parking on East Colfax Avenue itself is really low in the morning. On most blocks, it's almost nothing. So in terms of where the parking is being changed within this project, Colfax is losing some parking capacity. And so when you look at the demand being low on Colfax, the impact of that change really isn't changing overnight parking and early morning parking within the neighborhood as far as extra cars coming to park in the neighborhood. So the operations impact on how on-street curb trash operations isn't going to change from what it is currently. Secondly, East Colfax BRT, the design plans do not remove parking on 13th or 14th Avenue. We are looking at the curbside access plan, which is really looking at time limits and time of day parking and changes to that, but it's not looking at removing parking spaces or changing the total number of parking spaces throughout the project area. When looking at the north-south streets, the parking removal or change to parking is really minimal on those streets. There are some changes that we're in process of looking at, specifically related to if there's parking too close to the intersection, that doesn't allow safe operations of vehicles in sight distances, looking at opening those up or daylighting those locations. That is being considered as part of the design process. And then also within the curbside access plan that I mentioned earlier, flex zones, which really are commercial loading areas and locations designated for 15-minute drop-off or Uber Lyft drop-offs or things like that. There are some locations near Colfax that are being considered for a location at the curb being used for that specific usage. The curbside access plan that I mentioned is recommending revised time limits on the whole area, and we're in process of that. There's lots of opportunity for feedback on those recommendations and how those are changing. I'll talk about that later in the presentation here. But that plan is really focused on the whole area between 13th Avenue and 17th Avenue and Broadway and Colorado. So it really covers the whole area that we're talking about within this. I wanted to just show a map of existing parking utilization. So as part of the project, we collected parking utilization during several times of the day. And this just reinforces on Colfax in the early morning. There's not a lot of parking demand, not a lot of people park there overnight. What's shown on the screen here is really residential parking utilization, people parking overnight, and where that's happening. The red areas are where it's happening. The streets are fuller with cars from that residential parking demand, and then you can see the rest of the streets throughout the area. So we've been considering the utilization with the changes and how that all fits together to make sure that we're accommodating everyone within this process. So I'm going to move on to the second question. And the second question was really related to the transportation report. And so I'm going to give a quick overview of that report. And then I'm going to talk a bit about the findings of the traffic analysis, looking at Colfax, the streets and alleys, and also 13th and 14th Avenues. So just to start here, the transportation report is available on the project website. Really do encourage you, if you're interested, to go there and check it out. It's a very lengthy technical document, has lots of detail about traffic, changes in traffic at the intersections, on the streets, and really did quite a bit of analysis to get to those levels to look at how traffic is impacted with the project. There's also a quick summary sheet that really helps to spell it out in a couple of pages as far as the highlights here. Just to hit on a few points there, the typical diversion during the peak hour and peak direction, so this is during the busiest time of the day and the busiest direction, is about 2 to 5 vehicles per minute. So that's 120 to 300 vehicles per hour. And that's on 13th, 14th, 17th, 18th. Another stat here, the transit travel time savings because of the project is up to 30 minutes by 2040 between Broadway and 225, so the entire length of the corridor. So if you break that down, the average trip of 3 miles, there's about a 10-minute travel time savings on transit. And when you do that, repurposing the travel lanes on Colfax does result in some diversion to the parallel arterial streets during the peak hours. And so for an average trip length of 3 miles, that same 3 miles in the peak hour and peak direction, it results in up to 3 minutes of additional travel time during that peak hour. During the off peak, it has less of a impact on travel. So this is during the kind of the worst hour as far as the impact is concerned. So we're going to get to the numbers here in a second. 2 questions here. One is really focused on understanding the projected changes on Colfax after the lane reductions to look at those differences. And the second part of this question was understanding the traffic flows on 13th and 14th and just understanding what types of changes to expect on the arterials through the neighborhood. So what I'm about to share is I will caveat is raw model numbers and a very detailed model numbers, many of which were included in the transportation report. The modeling that was conducted is really looking at the full area and to understand the transportation impacts throughout the project area. And so when you get to the raw numbers, there's a lot to understand in terms of volumes and what those mean. So I'm going to share that. We're going to have an opportunity for questions after I get through some of this. So let's start with, so I'm going to talk about the east-west streets, the arterial streets, Colfax, 14th Avenue, 13th Avenue. And so in the model, we looked at the AM peak period and the AM peak hour and the PM peak period and the PM peak hour. So the peak period is 3 hours in length. So we modeled that period, and the peak hour is that the busiest hour during that period. So generally looking at 2 points along each of these different east-west corridors, one near York Street, west of York Street, and then one east of Colorado Boulevard. That's what's showing with these stats. So if we look at the difference between 2019, which is existing, and then 2019 plus build is after the project is constructed, what the model is showing is happening on these corridors. These are those raw results. So generally Colfax has a reduction in volume with the reduced capacity. Many of those vehicles are no longer using Colfax. So you can see that happens in the AM as well as in the PM pretty consistently in both locations. And then where are those vehicles going? So some of those vehicles are, those people are not driving anymore at all. They're taking transit, they're traveling it by different means. Excuse me. On 13th and 14th Avenue, there is some shift or some changes happening. So 14th in the morning has an increase of about 340 vehicles. That's for a 1 hour period again. And that's, around the 5 vehicles per minute category, if you think about it that way. And then east of Colorado, there's less of a change on 14th itself. On 13th, there's an increase of about 220 vehicles. So still close to that 5, maybe a little bit less vehicles per minute. And then east of Colorado Boulevard, there's an increase of around 500. If you look at the total volumes at that location, they start out lower. There's less volume currently. And so there's more capacity currently than there is there at east of Colorado than there is at west of York, to explain that a little bit. In the PM, similar changes happening on both of those. The direction of each of those streets really headed downtown or away from downtown impacts which street has changes in the PM versus the AM, and that's why we look at both of those periods. But they both had similar changes happening as far as what was modeled. So a related question here that was asked part D, I didn't state this up front, is if you could also walk us through the projected traffic flows entering and leaving East Colfax for the Congress Park neighborhood. So just starting out, the total trips that begin and end in Congress Park neighborhood is unchanged. So the model is assuming the same number of trips happening, the same people leaving and coming to Congress Park. What is changing is that those people making those trips might change their routes. So they, instead of taking Colfax in some cases, they'll choose to take 13th and 14th to get to or from their destinations. So diving into the details on the north-south neighborhood streets and the signalized intersections on Colfax, the question was, it will be the neighborhood will be restricted to a few controlled intersections, and what can we expect on those streets? So just to clarify here, yes, left turns will be restricted to those some signalized intersections which have left turns. So those movements will only be allowed at those intersections, and the reason that's being done is to increase safety along Colfax. If you don't have a signal to make a left turn, the vehicle would be turning in front of or through the BRT lanes, which causes a safety concern to be able to do that. And so all left turns are going to be signalized with a left turn on Colfax and to Colfax. So there's some increase on some of these locations due to rerouted vehicles. So what I mean by that is vehicles that currently are making lefts from side streets onto Colfax that can no longer make that turn when that turn is restricted. Those people are going to have to make that turn at a different location or a different intersection. So they're going to either shift to another street and make that turn onto Colfax, or they might shift off of Colfax entirely. So there's some increases due to that. Also, vehicles that are turning from Colfax into the neighborhood, those turns that aren't able to be made anymore, people that want to make that turn are going to have to make a turn at a signalized location and then take a little bit longer route to get to their destination. So that's why those changes are happening. So many of those left turns that are happening are going to be rerouted to signals, and then some will not be using Colfax at all and will choose to use 13th or 14th Avenue. So I do have the signals that are in this stretch on the screen here. So you know, between York and Colorado Boulevard, with some of those allowing left turns and some do not. But for the ones that are between Josephine and Colorado, I do want to dive into a little bit more detail just so you all can understand what the model has shown and what we're observing with some of the other locations that won't be able to make left turns anymore. So let's go to that screen next. Excuse me. So entering and exiting the neighborhood on Colfax will be restricted to those locations. So we just kind of talked about where those locations are. So you can see those here, and there's a lot of numbers on the screen here, but looking at the existing AM and PM, which shows 2019 AM and 2019 PM, that's how many vehicles in the peak hour are currently using those streets. So 38 on Columbine, a little over 200 on Elizabeth, 88 on Fillmore, 49 on Steele, and so on and so forth. We can talk in detail about some of these if folks have questions when we get to the Q&A. On many of the streets, there is a volume decrease. And the reason for that is that phenomenon that I was talking about earlier with many vehicles that are currently using Colfax and turning left on the Colfax. When they're no longer able to do that, they're choosing an entirely different trip and going down to 13th or 14th, or choosing a different route that's even outside of these areas that we're talking about. So at Columbine, Fillmore, Columbine, Steele, Madison, Garfield, Jackson, that's the case in the AM. And then at Columbine, Fillmore, Steele, Madison, Garfield, Jackson, that's the case in the PM. So there are some increases on some of these streets, however, with some of the signal locations channeling more vehicles that need to make a left turn onto Colfax or need to make a left turn from Colfax. So I'll go through those here And I guess before I do that, I forgot to mention Madison Street is a new signal, and Jackson Street is also a new signal. That Jackson Street signal is for National Jewish, for westbound Colfax to have a way to make a left into National Jewish. So the increases that we're looking at here on Columbine are in the morning are about 38 vehicles in an hour, and about 75 in the evening. Elizabeth, so I guess the decreases there are really, it's not going to have an increase, and so that's why we put in decrease there. Elizabeth Street does have an increase. That's the street that goes through to access East High School through the Esplanade. Has an increase of around 50 vehicles in an hour in the AM and the PM. Fillmore Street has about an 18 vehicle per hour increase in the morning. However, in the evening, it has a decrease. Steel Street is decreases in both directions. Adams Street, which I know many on the call are concerned on, does have some increases, looking at about 21 in the morning. The evening, the busiest hour, does have a little more than 100 vehicles increase when you look at that volume change. Madison Street decreases, and the rest of these intersections are all decreases. So I just gave you a lot of numbers here. Something to consider here is kind of a rule of thumb that Dottie uses. About 2,000 vehicles per day, or around 200 vehicles an hour, is a rule of thumb that they use on local streets. So really, if the volumes are falling below that threshold, those streets are really functioning how they're intended and are carrying the volumes that they're intended to carry as far as how a local street should function. So most of these locations fit within that category, with the exception of Elizabeth Street, which is having some increased traffic here with the high school access and some other things going on. That's the kind of rule of thumb there. So this is my last slide as far as the analysis. I do have one additional slide on some next steps, and then I want to stop and have a discussion, questions, and we'll hear from folks who have that. So with the upcoming opportunities for feedback, I did want to mention the curbside access plan. I think many on this call have heard about that this effort is going on, and we did have a map that was posted online that was available for stakeholder feedback and public feedback. That we got a lot of comments and we heard a lot of things. We've since closed that feedback round out and are incorporating all those comments and doing some additional detail on the recommendations. And we will be having an updated map with another round, an opportunity for feedback that will be coming probably in January. And so we'll be sharing that link with you all and others to provide feedback and look at that. And we'll really encourage you to stay involved and become involved with that effort. And then the last effort that's currently going on is 13th and 14th. We know that safety is at the top of minds of most people, and it is a very important thing to think through in this project and just in general. With the changes in volumes, and even without the changes in volume, safety on 13th and 14th is top of mind. So as an effort as part of the study, it's not part of the Colfax design, but it's an effort that Dottie is undertaking and that we're currently working with them on, is analyzing safety on 13th and 14th. So we're currently conducting that analysis right now. And with that analysis, we're looking at historic crash data to look at trends and patterns and things happening. We're also looking at speeds, and we're looking at all the different locations on 13th, 14th, 17th, 18th, between Broadway and Yosemite. So a lot of area, including the two streets we're talking about here, 13th and 14th. We are going to be conducting a map-based round of activity that we're going to be looking for feedback from you all on. And that will be coming around the same time as the curbside access plan. And so there'll be an opportunity to drop a pin and put your issues and really talk to and influence some of the recommendations that are being made as part of that effort. And we'll wrap that up in the spring as far as the analysis is concerned, and we'll have some recommendations on improvements on both of those quarters. So with that, I'm going to stop talking for a minute here and open it up for questions from anybody.
Can we get the full screen back? So I can see. John, would you like to start the questions?
Yes, thanks. So a couple questions. Why is it that the preponderance of the extra traffic is going to end up on Adams as opposed to some of those other streets that are going to have the access? And do you guys really feel that 103 cars per hour is not significant for a neighborhood street?
Yeah, let me answer the first part of that question, and then talk to the second part. So part of the way that the totals are calculated is looking at of the places where you can't make left turns anymore, where will those left turns be redirected to? So it was a combination of the model and then also our own data collection at every single unsignalized left turn location to come up with these totals. And Adams does cover a pretty large area as far as several blocks surrounding it, where those blocks don't have left turns from Colfax or to Colfax. So it carries a larger stretch of road in that area, and that's part of the reason. Specifically, some streets like those making going westbound on Colfax, turning onto Steel, are going to either do that on Adams or find a different route. So that's just an example, but those add up, those little pieces add up to make that total on Adams. So that provides a little bit more detail on that front. And then to answer your second question, it is significant in terms of change to if you're on Adams Street. That is a change, and understand that that's a concern, and that's hard to hear some of that when you live there. And so we recognize that, and that's part of the project is looking at how these impact the different streets. And we're sharing this information to provide that to you, and we want to make sure that we're discussing and talking through it.
That's good, because I can tell you right now that we as the neighbors are getting together to really tackle this problem, and that's not going to be an acceptable figure. So one way or the other, it's got to be reworked. But the other thing that you guys haven't looked at in your study is, some of this traffic is going to spill over. You haven't addressed anything on 12th Avenue, because I think what's going to happen is that traffic from Colfax is going to filter in to 14th and 13th, but it's also going to filter into 12th. And that means that every Uber, every UPS, every Amazon, every beer truck making deliveries is going to have to come down those streets, and they're going to get on 12th as well. So I think taking a holistic view of this, it really doesn't look too good.
Okay, I'm going to give someone else a chance to ask a question. Maggie?
Sure. My question is when are you going to do a study that has to do with what's happening right now? I noticed all the slides that you showed us were from 2019, and things have changed a great deal now. 2019, things were a little slower. For instance, too, when I look at your slides, I saw that some of these places that have projected lights are the ones that are on the north side. For instance, Fillmore, Steel. And that makes a difference because the people who are living on Steel on the south side may or may not be able to make a left-hand turn. So those are some of the comments that I have. The spillover concerns me a great deal. And I'll be frank, Nick, I know that you live in Congress Park. How is this going to impact your street?
You're asking me my street? I live on a I live on a residential street that has lots of cut through traffic on it right now. So I understand that concern.
Okay,
Yep. To address your question on the 2019 date, just a little bit more background. The modeling that was conducted was done in 2021, and so that era. So 2019 is essentially existing conditions. Do acknowledge that things change every year. Another piece of analysis specifically on the safety study is the crash information that we're looking at is for a 5-year period going through the end of 2022. And then we also collected speed data earlier this year. And so the ongoing analysis and data that we're using is the latest data that's available for those pieces.
I see.
To acknowledge that.
I see. Thank you.
Yep.
Amber,
Thank you. I'm wondering. Okay, well, first of all, thank you. I love listening to you talk, Nick. I thought that was a really cool presentation, looking at the numbers for the traffic data. What are the odds of maybe having like some like a better bike lane on like 12th or 13th or 14th? I guess we'd have to wait for the safety study to find out more about that, or yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, I can answer that, and others from Dottie, if you're on, can help with that too. As part of the Colfax BRT design, that's not part of this design in particular. The safety study is a little broader in terms of what we're looking at, intended to look at crash activity and pedestrians crossing and other activity, bikes and pedestrians. And so that we'll see what recommendations come out of that. And Dottie has other plans that are being looked at for bike improvements that are separate efforts. So I'm not going to speak to those as part of this, but that there's opportunities for feedback on that and other projects that will be taking a look at other improvements in that space.
Thank you.
You bet.
And Nick, I can jump on that a little bit too. I mean, I work almost exclusively on East Colfax BRT. I mean, like 99% of my time is on that. So sometimes it's hard to stay fully informed about what other parts of the city are working on other things. But I know that there's an entire department or a division of Dottie that's dedicated to finding new and better ways for bicycles and pedestrians both to get through the city. And so I know that with 13th and 14th, adjacent to the study, they're taking a look at that. And then for the Colfax BRT project itself, we've worked very closely with that with the bicycle advocacy program to find and enhance those bicycle connections north-south to help get across Colfax. But again, we work on the Colfax BRT project, so we're a little more we're spending a lot more time focused on that rather than other efforts citywide, even if they're near, but I try to stay informed as much as I can. So
a more on topic question that I have then is with those traffic calculations, is the overall like the overall amount of people driving cars along these three streets, Colfax, 13th, 14th, is that going to decrease, you think, as a result of this BRT? I'm just wondering if this is going to get people out of their cars.
We expect that more people will be riding the bus because we're doing everything that we can to make it a compelling option for people, to make it attractive and appealing. So we're making it easier to get there. We're doing everything that we can to increase the speed of transit through the corridor. So we expect the ridership to go up. Now, one of the reasons why this is such a great candidate for having transit, for building other options for transportation along here, is that when we looked at the population increases along with the zoning in the city, it was painting a very dire picture. And in 2040, if we don't do anything, the traffic needing to move east and west through the corridor is not going to be good. And I know that it's not good. We all know that it's not good right now. This has been a situation that we've been looking at for 15 years. Like, we've known that it's been challenging to get east and west through the city for a very long time. And so this is what we're trying to do to help alleviate that.
That's absolutely fascinating. Well, thank you for answering my questions.
Brian?
Hi, thanks for the presentation, everybody. I actually didn't know that we were going to be taking like prepay prior to boarding. So that's awesome to hear. I think it'll like really help to speed up the boarding. Question, and maybe even a suggestion for the left turns. Are you aware, will drivers be able to do U-turns at the signals on Colfax?
Yes.
Yeah, because then that could be like, for instance, I'm thinking right away of like Monroe, for instance. If you do a U-turn at Madison with a new signal, then that helps you get to Monroe to go to whether it's Cerebral or any of those other shops right there. So that would help then limit people from cutting through the neighborhood to those other streets to then get to their. So that's good to hear. Snow clearing. I think it's safe to assume, but I wanted to make sure that Dottie is going to somehow manage the snow clearing of the platform since I'm in the middle of Colfax. Can you confirm that or look into that? And then, as a side note, once the plows come through, the ramps often get blocked. I don't know if it would be possible for those same crews to just make sure that the ramps get cleared again on the actual like sidewalk side. I know that won't technically be that crew's responsibility, but if Dottie comes through with the plows and creates an ice dam there, it would be awesome if then the crews that came through and cleared the platforms then remove those ice dams, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brian, yeah, we are thinking a lot about snow for this project, both on the stations and in the roadway. Snow on the stations, I can confirm that either Denver or RTD is going to make sure that these are cleared. One of the things that we have to do to receive funding from FTA, and they're providing $127 million for this project. One of the things we have to do is we have to give them a plan showing how we're going to operate this bus line and how we're going to do things like make sure the snow is clear. And so in that plan, we show how frequently we plan to shovel the bus stations. And so all the bus stations will be shoveled. And I'm struggling to recall the exact time requirement, but we have a time requirement, something like within, I want to say 12 hours of snow starting. But I can get back to you on the exact requirement for that. That's a little, yeah. Anyway, the Dottie will make sure, the city will make sure that the bus stations are clear of snow. Now, with the streets, we're also very aware that snow clogging up in the streets presents a significant, in certain locations, presents a significant impediment for pedestrians crossing. And so we're doing a lot of improvements. Part of the reasons, one of the benefits of adding these curb bump outs, which is narrowing down the street a little bit there, is it allows us to create other areas where snow could be stored. And so one of the things that we're thinking about is snow storage adjacent to the bus stations. And so I think that we haven't, I don't think that we've made a commitment yet as far as shoveling the snow at the ramps on on the sides that are away from the bus stations, but I think that that's an excellent suggestion, and I think that that's something that we can look into and incorporate that in our operating plan. So that's a great suggestion, Brian. Thank you.
We have a couple more folks that have questions, and we're getting to the end here, and we have one more presenter too. Matt, you want to ask a
Sure.
question?
I'll be really brief, and thanks, Nick and Jonathan, for all the work you've put into this. As a daily 15 commuter, I can't wait for BRT. I hope it goes to Federal in Colorado one day. I was just curious for this safety study. I'm curious like what that deliverable would look like. I think a lot of us would probably like to use that to look to constrain traffic on 13th and 14th one day, and curious kind of what we could expect from the time and effort you're going to put in there for us.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we're looking at a lot, as I mentioned, crash data. And with that, there's a million ways to slice and dice and think to causes of crashes, and is an intersection operating, or is there a certain crash type more represented at a certain intersection than we would expect, right? Like if there's more broadside crashes, is one of the things we're finding. Right, there's a lot of broadside crashes on 13th and 14th, and so we'll be looking into and documenting all those specific locations, as well as recommendations on what to do to improve that. And so that's part of the deliverable. The other piece is looking at speeds and understanding relationships between speeds, parking, operations, and really getting into the next level as far as what can be done. And those recommendations then will, be taken forward through various aspects within DOTI as far as what to do with those. But that's something that we'll be able to share when we get further down with that, some of the results of that with all the folks on the call here.
Thank you.
Miles, you're the last question tonight.
Okay, thanks for presenting the data. It's good to actually see this for the first time, at least get an understanding. So just a quick question, or just let's just take one of the streets. So let's just take Adams. And in the past, I've heard different things from you, because in the past I was asking, so what happens on that street? It's a narrow street. When all the cars start backing up because they're trying to get through the neighborhood or make a left turn on 14th. What happens on Adams? How many cars are going to back up? So having your peak thing is good, but during that peak thing, how many cars are backed up because they have to stop at 14th Avenue?
As far as cars that are queued at 14th waiting to get through because they're waiting for traffic, is that what your question is?
No, so if you were heading west on Colfax, you had to make a left turn at Adams. Now all the cars are making a left turn at Adams because it's one of 3 left turns. So now all the cars are heading down Adams. They're heading east. No, they're heading north, south, east, west. So they're heading toward 14th. Now you've got this backup of cars because there's traffic on 14th. So what happens at Adams and 14th when those new cars, that new quantity of cars is trying to cross 14th or make a left turn at 14th? When the 14th Avenue traffic, I think we also heard that the new light on Colorado Boulevard, the traffic's going to back up on 14th Avenue through a couple of light cycles. So it's my question is what's happening at that intersection of Adams and 14th? And I think from what you had said before is you guys haven't done those calculations.
That specific movement is so that's not currently a signalized location.
Correct.
So that there's a lot of assumptions about how local streets operate in the model. It's part of the bigger modeling process. I will say it'll probably operate similarly to with some additional vehicles. It'll be a little bit worse, but the way it currently operates in terms of waiting for a gap in 14th to make a left turn, from Adams. You might have to wait a little bit longer for that gap. There will be,
Which would make the number of cars back up even more, correct? If it's slowing down because the traffic on 14th is higher, then the gaps are smaller, which means you've got Adams Street with more cars backing up during that peak time.
It could, but also the person making a left turn from Colfax and then going down 14th probably wouldn't choose to make that as their route if they know that that's the case. And so you'd have some natural changes in routes and evening within the network to make that operate better is how that would end up operating, right? So someone might choose to make a U-turn, as was mentioned earlier, and then get on a different street, or choose a different route entirely after experiencing something where it might be backed up. So that's my short answer there, Miles.
So in other words, it's just and that was my concern about speeding up the whole project, is it's like these little details you're talking about. So are they going to need a signalized intersection at Adams and 14th at some point because traffic backs up? And what I think I'm hearing from you guys is we're focusing on BRT, and what happens off of BRT. And so much time and money has been spent on this. It's like, what are the mitigations? What are you going to mitigate? What are the crashes? Because now we've removed traffic from Colfax and we moved it onto the side streets and onto 14th and 13th. The crashes are going to go up because it's now safer on Colfax because there's less cars. So I'm not hearing the analysis of, we're expecting this and we're going to measure this in case the calculations are wrong. We have some thresholds of, here's our expectation and we're going to measure it, because if we're wrong, we may have to do something else. And that's why speeding up the whole project a year is like, there's so many unanswered questions I see. And then also a protected bike lane on 14th. So there's a lot of things happening, and increased density on Colfax, which would be possibly more cars, more density, more traffic. So in those aspects, you're just going to build it, basically, is kind of what I'm hearing.
So we're conducting the safety analysis, as I was talking about earlier, on 13th and 14th. So that will have recommendations that could be related to new signalization or improved pedestrian bicycle crossings. Could be at that location you're talking about. That hasn't been recommended yet, but that analysis is being conducted and will be part of this effort before the construction starts on the BRT project. And so that will be something we can discuss when we get further along with that piece.
But construction starting in a year, you're going to have the safety study and they're going to run the calculations on all those intersections before that?
We're doing it right now.
So in addition, I would like to add that Dottie, there's a team of people outside of us. We're focused on the Colfax BRT and analyzing those traffic impacts. But there's an additional team looking at 13th and 14th in particular, and looking at ways to make those streets operate better. And that would definitely include the intersection of 14th and Adams.
And here's my
Gentlemen.
final comment would be, my concern about all this is you're moving into construction phase, so you can't change anything, you can't modify anything, you'll be building it. And there isn't any way for you to go, oh, well, maybe we should change something. Maybe it shouldn't be constructed here. Maybe we shouldn't because the mitigation's too complicated or it's going to hurt the adjacent neighborhoods. But you're moving forward to just start building it. And that's my biggest concern of, I don't think this has been thought out. And you're just going to build it and see what happens. And these adjacent neighborhoods are going to get hit hard with this. And I'm not really seeing an understanding of what's going to happen. And people are already selling their houses in the neighborhood. So,
Gentlemen, it's 8 o'clock, and I appreciate Nick and Jonathan, Emma. Miles, I'm sorry to have to kind of end it for tonight. Thank you for coming. We will have you back again. Obviously, there's a lot of issues that we continue to struggle with. But I appreciate your coming this evening and giving us your time. Chaim Bennell is here from House of Copa. Chaim, would you like to introduce yourself and talk about House of Copa for a moment?
Certainly. Hello, everybody. I apologize. I'm a little late to the meet here. I was trying to get in and was locked out. Vicky had to send me a code on the backside here. So I appreciate the opportunity to join you all, and it's very interesting to hear all of these projects that are in the works in regards to a lot of the issues that are really at concern with some of the neighborhoods concerned with what I'm hoping to do and proposing to do at House of Copa as well. And a lot of this has been revealed in part through my application licensing process for beer, wine, and cabaret at the location, which has been approved or recommended rather, and is currently on the desk of the city attorney for final approval. But ultimately, my hope and intent for the space at 1200 Clayton Street is, largely in alignment with a lot of the initiatives that, bear with me one second here. With a lot of the initiatives that are, kind of at the forefront of the city's hopes, for community engagement, business collaboration, equity, diversity, access, all of the above. And a lot of the feedback that I've received from the community from the moment I started doing work around this space was really the desire to want to be able to utilize that space in its entirety if possible. And I'm a Colorado native. I grew up in Boulder County mostly and raised my son there. And but I've worked in Denver many years. I have kind of an eclectic background, but wound up being an ER nurse for about 13 years, and I've worked in most of the facilities around the city. And during the pandemic, unbeknownst to me, this space at 1200 Clayton, was opened up and utilized kind of at large, for everybody to spread out. And the ability to utilize that space is coming to an end this year. I'm in the process of applying for an expanded permanent use of that parking lot that I would like to develop. I would like to really improve the aesthetic of the property and have the space available for, community engagement, small business collaborations. I really have this kind of idea for, a regenerative sort of destination, really, and the interesting thing about the space that is sort of innate and already in place when I arrived is that there's such a large population of remote workers in the city, and they naturally gravitate towards this space because it's a beautiful place to sit and work outside, and we have power in place and things like that. And along the way, multiple organizations that run the spectrum really have approached me asking for utilization of the space. And there's been collaborations with other small businesses already. We've done some projects with Community Clay, and there's some other marketers and photographers and craft-like businesses that have sought us as a space where they can have a little bit of have exposure and things of that nature. Real estate agents and real estate brokers, people always ask if they can come and utilize this space as a meeting space. And so, in that vein, I've been putting together a site development plan that I actually was trying to submit to the city today. I wasn't able to get it executed. But I'm working on it, and I'm happy to share that with you all if you're interested in seeing it, because at large, it does involve a reorganization of the parking structure. I personally think it's a little bit of an improvement, but it does relegate street parking versus the parking lot. And one of the reasons that I feel it's necessary is that in the original approved site development plan back in 1964, the designated ADA spot in the lot is no longer to code. And quite frankly, it's limiting for somebody who needs access to kind of get in and out of that parking lot with the way it's laid out right now. One of the other things that I've noticed over time is that because the community is innately used to sitting in that space over the last 3 years, there's a little bit of a safety element involved in opening it back up. And the parking lot isn't really designed, for perpendicular cars to park, because there's not a safe way for them to back out and turn onto 12th Street again. So, largely what I've identified is that people like to, grab chairs and tables, and they kind of hide themselves behind the shrubs and whatnot. And, if a car comes in there, I just, it makes me nervous that somebody's going to get whacked. And I would hate to see that happen. More so, there's a lot of young families in the neighborhood. There's a lot of children and people, having children. And I think it'd be really nice to be able to, put some ballards or something to kind of block off that entrance and allow, families to bring their kids in there with their scooters and their bikes and things like that and have a safe place to engage. So that's kind of, the overarching theme of what I am hoping to do. And I do show, a repurposed striped painted ADA spot on the street with a direct ADA access from the street right through the front door. And what would be gained by doing that is additional street parking places in front of that, where the kind of the entrance to the driveway is now. I'd like the ability to incorporate other food service businesses in this space, and I haven't had an opportunity to circle back with Jake specifically, but I'd like to be able to collaborate with Spinelli's for the utilization of this space, because they don't have dining in front of their establishment. And we're not necessarily a full service restaurant. So it'd be nice to be able to bring a food truck in there, as a guest offering, and sort of offer the community a little bit of exposure to things that maybe they couldn't capture in their little, in our little neck of the woods, and have some other guest businesses come in and open up that space where, the Congress Park Neighborhood Association could come and meet and, have your meeting there if you'd like, things of that nature. So if you guys would allow me, I'm happy to share my screen and kind of walk through some of this stuff to give everybody an idea, unless anybody has questions for me.
Chaim, we're right at the end of our meeting, so I think tonight, does anyone have questions they'd like to ask Chaim right now? Judith?
Chaim, what is your phone number? And will you have it on your website?
I'm not going to put my personal phone number on the website.
No, I want the House of Copa's website phone number.
So right now we have, well, House of Copa doesn't have a landline. So I'm in the process of trying to harness all of this data. Actually, presently it's I apologize, it's not available. Presently I'm sort of the one-man show right now. But
What are
I'm,
your winter hours then?
well, right now, I mean, they're posted on Google, but right now, it's till to 2:30 7 a.m. to 2:30 p.m.
Okay.
And largely the reason why I needed to reduce them is because of this holding pattern right now with the licensing. We simply don't make money in the afternoon at all. It costs me money to staff it and you know, keep the lights on and the equipment running specifically. And I mean, that's kind of the inherent truth as to why a coffee shop hasn't stood the test of time at this location, is because they haven't been able to do anything in the afternoon, and it's not sustainable. So, you know, part of the expansion of this business model is very much to be a sustainable presence there, you know, offering employment for people in the community and things of that nature. So.
Chaim, thank you for coming and talking about your business. Unfortunately, it looks like Spinelli's wasn't able to come, but we can revisit that. February 21st is our next meeting. I want to wish everyone a happy holiday season, and thank you for attending. I'm sure February will bring more information from BRT, because we will continue to work on that and pursue your questions. So again, thank
Judith,
you.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Judith, I'm sending you my personal email right now, and you're welcome to contact me there, and we can continue this conversation. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have, okay?
Great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you on February 21st.
Thanks, Vicky.
You bet.
I don't want, thank you.